Hey folks, I'm recording this on July 15th. It is Monday. On Saturday, Donald Trump was shot by a troubled young man on a rooftop near an event he was conducting in Pennsylvania. He was struck either by a bullet or by glass from a teleprompter that the bullet struck in his ear. He was hustled off stage. It was a moment where the long, unfortunate, sad, sorry history of American violence struck a former president. We have had presidents assassinated in this country, candidates assassinated in this country, candidates attacked in this country, more times than the glowing, shining city on a hill, Western civilized democracy should have. Those attacks have come in large forms and small. They've come in serious and terrible consequences, JFK, and consequences that were tragic for those who were there, such as the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan by John Hinckley, in which James Brady was permanently injured. They've come in all kinds of packages in all kinds of places. They've come from sick people. They've come from broken people. They've come from criminals. They've come from people who were truly driven by demons we cannot ever understand. This attack has been ascribed by many people in the MAGA media as having been provoked by criticism of Donald Trump. I am here today to tell you that that argument falls short in every dimension. The political criticism of Donald Trump has never led to a Charlottesville. It's never led to a January 6th. It's never led to a Tree of Life synagogue. It's never led to an event where people attempted to kill the vice president of the United States. I'm sorry. I'm not going to back down on this. The Lincoln Project will not back down on this. We will not be silenced because a single broken young man attempted to kill Donald Trump. What that kid did was wrong. What that kid did was despicable, reprehensible. It should be condemned universally. But this country is full of broken young men. They grow up in a culture of video games. They grow up in a culture of online chat. They grow up bullied and lonely and sad and isolated. This is a kid who had a very dim future ahead of him. He was not popular. He was not smart. He was not outgoing. He was a sad, broken kid. And the tragedy here is that it's the same kind of kid that would walk into a schoolroom full of young people and shoot them. Same kind of tragedy that a young man like this who again, relentlessly bullied, tried to map over to this 20-year-old kid whose immaturity was manifest in every way, that it was somehow motivated by critiques of Donald Trump, by criticisms of Donald Trump, is an insult. It's an insult to the law enforcement folks that were on the scene trying to protect the president. It's an insult to the people who were grievously injured. It's an insult to the fire captain who was on the scene who was killed. And it's an insult to the intelligence of Americans. Donald Trump deserves the criticism he receives. Donald Trump deserves the opposition he receives. Donald Trump remains a fundamental threat to the American system. Donald Trump remains a fundamental threat to the republic, to the Constitution, to the rule of law, and to the representative democracy of this country. Now, Donald Trump had a million allies out there this weekend saying, oh, Rick Wilson was to blame for this, or Joe Biden was to blame for this, or Never Trump was to blame for this, or Antifa was to blame for this. They're great at finding a catalog of imaginary demons to try to terrify you. They're great at trying to silence the critics of Donald Trump. Believe me, folks, I have spent 9 years in this fight. I have never once, never in the course of this battle, ever believed more firmly than that Donald Trump continues to represent a great danger to this country, a profound danger to this country. An epistemic system of understanding who he is would require you to put yourself in a darkness that this country's almost never experienced. You can see the road ahead of you. Project 2025 is a roadmap. Agenda 47 is Project 2025 in diet form. the RNC platform that you will see this week expanded upon endlessly is the same thing. He has told us what he will do. His people have told us what they will do. And we've heard it repeated over and over again. And the idea that this horrific act by this broken young man that should never be praised or approved by anyone. The idea, though, that Donald Trump now is immune from criticism, that Donald Trump now should be anointed and appointed, that Donald Trump now can do no wrong, that Donald Trump has done no wrong, that every legal case against Donald Trump must be dismissed, that everyone involved in the pursuit of the campaign this year should be silenced, is an absurdity. It will not be accepted by me or by anyone else who believes that this country, that this republic, this Constitution is worth fighting for. At the Lincoln Project, we will not cease. We will not shut up. We will not stop. The critiques of Donald Trump are legitimate, they are demanded, and they must continue. If anyone believes otherwise, they should shut off the video right now, shut off the podcast right now, move along and live in your little bubble. Because the country you will inherit in a world where Donald Trump cannot be criticized is a country you will not recognize as America.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night and good luck.
Hey, folks, and welcome back to the Lincoln Project podcast. I am your host, Rick Wilson. It has been a consequential weekend. But as I'm recording this morning with Tristan Snell, we have had a piece of breaking news that is not going to wait. Folks, Judge Cannon in Florida has dismissed the documents case against Donald Trump based on what non-lawyer Rick Wilson looks at it and says she found an excuse, not a reason. She's doing this in a way that is probably not going to survive appeal, but it does, in fact, delay the case a lot longer. Tristan, talk to me about what you've learned so far about Judge Cannon's decision in this case.
Yeah, this literally dropped for all of us about an hour before taping just now, so still digesting everything. It's like a 93-page opinion, but the short version is Judge Cannon has found fault, in her view, with the way Jack Smith was appointed as special counsel, and thereby says that Jack Smith's entire operation is illegitimate and that thereby the indictment should be dismissed. This is a extreme outcome. It's probably not going to get held up on appeal, even by the 11th Circuit and even by SCOTUS. But as we've seen, God only knows what could happen with the courts as stacked with extremist right-wing judges as they are. Who knows how this is going to go? But now it's official. Instead of just thinking that the Florida case was stuck in the mud and maybe it would get unstuck, now it's just dead. The good news is that allows it to be appealed. And I have another piece of good news too, Rick, but I'm curious to see where you're going to take this.
Look, I think the victory for Trump in this case was always delay.
Yep.
This is another delay. You and I are having this conversation now. Not a lot of people have had time to process this entire ruling of hers, but it looks to me, again, non-attorney, but it looks to me in a quick glance over the case that once again she took a fairly edge case argument from the Trump legal team, and said this is the holy writ of God, and
right.
and it by your and a lot of other folks, it's like this doesn't seem to be something that's going to survive an appeal, and obviously Jack Smith has the ability to appeal it. What happens when the 11th Circuit takes this up and says, no, you're wrong, Judge Cannon? Does it go back to her, or does it get reassigned to another judge in the circuit?
I actually don't know the mechanics of how that would work. I think that it would go back to her in all likelihood. I think that the potential silver lining here maybe is that while they're appealing it, if I'm DOJ, I go ahead and I file a narrow but powerful indictment in the District of New Jersey specific to the facts that we know about documents being waved around at Bedminster. And
Right.
that should be it's a much narrower case at that point because the documents were mostly being housed at Mar-a-Lago. That is where the unlawful retention of the documents, because it's that statute, the retention of defense documents, that's the statute where they really have Trump dead to rights. But
Sure,
they've got it.
sure.
They still can bring that in New Jersey. If I'm them, I plunge forward with that too, just to try to keep multiple things going. But yeah, I actually don't know exactly what will happen once this goes back to the district court, if it ever gets there.
I think that's that question. I mean, look, Judge Cannon has engaged in this in the most politicized and political way possible.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the nod and the wink scenario. You know,
Right.
when people find out that Judge Cannon was, going to, weekend retreats in Montana with Leonard Leo's people, I think it's not so unsubtle when Matt Gaetz immediately tweets out future Supreme Court Justice Eileen Cannon today.
Right.
It's been a kind of grotesque thumb on the scale from her in the entire course of this case.
Yes.
So, obviously Jack Smith is on a clock. He's on a very tight timeline. I wonder in a sort of counterfactual universe, what would have happened if Merrick Garland had said the minute they found this out, and didn't wait almost 2 years into the Biden administration to take this up.
I know. I mean, I think that's the thing that's going to haunt us, and it's going to haunt them. I'm sure it already does haunt them. There have been conflicting reports about what happened there, right? We had initially heard reporting from the Washington Post and others that Garland and senior brass at the FBI as well had made a purposeful decision not to go after senior officials connected with January 6th and the aftermath of it. Now, the facts around this case came out a little bit later. This is, for the classified records case, they actually moved fairly quickly given when they found out about all of this, because it is probably true that, there should have been at least, in most cases like this, and by the way, this is what happened with Mike Pence and with Joe Biden, the possible retention or accidental moving of documents to a personal residence post office is really a clerical problem that normally can be resolved through some letters back and forth.
Right.
Long story short, I don't know that DOJ could have moved too much faster on the classified records case. However, the J6 case, yes. Now, there's been other reporting saying that they were trying to go after the top officials all along. I don't know what to believe there. I do wish that they had just moved faster overall, though, obviously. And I'm sure they do, too. I bet you that they wish that they had moved faster now. And I bet you that they wish that they had put that New Jersey case into the hopper way before now. They've kind of held back. And on the J6 case, they didn't indict Giuliani or Meadows or Eastman or any of those people that they could have indicted. They left them as unindicted co-conspirators. I actually believe we're about to get a superseding indictment in the D.C. case any day now, sometime in the next couple of weeks, that will kick in time for Judge Chutkan to take back the case, because she's about to in August. I think this is far from the last surprise we're going to get in one of these Trump cases this summer.
Yeah, I think that I don't think the Justice Department has given up. I don't think they're going to roll over on any of this.
No.
Because as you know, and as I know, they don't give up on these things.
No.
They will pursue and pursue and pursue in order to drive home the certitude of trying to bring justice.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to play a softball, thing here and say,
No.
oh, well, Judge Chutkan made her ruling in the lower court. We're done. I just can't imagine that's the case. Or not, excuse me, Judge Cannon, not Chutkan, excuse me.
Right.
And I don't think that they've, I think Judge Chutkan has been a much more formidable and justice-seeking, jurist than Cannon ever has been. I mean, Chutkan seems like a serious person. It kept reminding me of that scene in Succession, where he's like,
it's a Succession thing. Chutkan is a serious person.
I love you, but you're not serious fucking people.
Chutkan is a serious person. Cannon is not. Cannon was a last minute appointment put in by Donald Trump after he knew he'd lost the election in a court that he knew was right by Mar-a-Lago. This
Yes.
was a very purposeful move. That he knew there was a chance that she would be somebody who would be important to him, that seat getting filled by a loyalist would be important for him. I still believe that everything around her appointment and all the way she's handled this case should be the subject of intense investigation by Congress. I very much do, and I hope it will be someday.
I think if the games play out and there's a Democratic majority, the way the Republicans made up things to examine the behavior of various Democratic officials and judges will be seen as comic, because Judge Cannon and others have given them a lot of actual territory to explore in terms of corruption on the court, including the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court. Yep.
So Tristan, obviously the weekend showed that externalities in campaigns are always there. And the biggest of the big externalities happened this weekend when there was an attempted assassination against the former president. Where do you see that altering the sort of political discourse we're in right now? Because I have a lot of opinions about it, but I'm asking a lot of my smart friends where their heads are on it, because I'm curious if you see this as a fundamental alteration of the race, or a comment on a society that's got a real problem with broken young men, and who in families, they don't lock their firearms up when they've got a broken young man in the house. So let's talk that through a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, I think that obviously this is kind of anything like this is a sort of crazy externality, sort of black swan type event.
Yep.
We still at this taping don't even know the contours of what the heck happened the other day.
That's right.
Was he actually hit by a bullet? Was he hit by shards of glass from his teleprompter?
Right.
Why was he allowed to stand up and then show his full body to the audience and lift up his fist as he was leaving, rather than being kept on the ground? If you look at the tape of Ronald Reagan when he was shot by John Hinckley back in whatever that was, 81. 82, and they kept him on the ground. He did his whole waving and thumbs up thing from his hospital room. He didn't get to pose for a photograph from that spot. They kept him away and they kept him out of sight in case there were other gunmen. There's a lot that I think needs to be investigated about exactly what happened, and also why was that rooftop left like that? It was so obviously someplace where somebody could. Whenever we have any president or former president come through, I live in New York City, and whenever we have somebody come through, there are snipers on the rooftops of most of the major buildings as people come through.
100%.
And you need to do that. And I just don't understand why those precautions weren't taken in this situation. And there's reports that in some situations the Secret Service only does X and local law enforcement does Y. We need to get to the bottom of all of that, regardless of who that principal is, because we need to know that these individuals that are on the campaign trail are safe. We have to. So that's one. That's a law enforcement thing that has to happen in the wake of this. Number two, I don't know if it really affects the total dynamics of the race at all, except for one big thing, which is that it totally, completely wiped. It was an Etch-a-Sketch moment that wiped the news cycle clean, and all of the chatter about Joe Biden is now gone for now.
Yeah, I think that is a fascinating outcome here. That this idea that we were only going to talk about Joe Biden's age for the rest of the campaign, gone.
It seems to be gone. Reports are that Democratic politicians have now decided that they're standing down and no longer trying to push him out. I don't know if that's going to hold true for the media. The news cycle was probably due to shift a bit this week anyway, because we're about to start the Republican National Convention tonight.
That's right.
As of this taping. So I think all eyes are going to be on Trump. I think all eyes should also be on Project 2025 and on the Trump agenda, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that a bit. But I still feel like with many of these things, it's noise, not signal. Most people already know who they're going to vote for. This is really going to come down to turnout and a vanishingly small number of swing voters. I think the turnout is key. obviously we talked last time when you were on my show, and I'm sure
Right.
you have more to say on this subject because you've been doing more polling. The secret, sort of hidden story of what some of these Republicans are going to do once they get into to the privacy of the voting booth, and whether or not they're going to continue to support their guy when they're there in with the ballot box in front of them, and that it's not just about the turnout of like, is each side getting to the polls, but is there some secret weakness in either side's numbers? And I know that you know and believe that there's a lot of weakness in the Republican numbers and a lot of people who will leave it blank or vote for Biden and maybe aren't telling a pollster that because maybe their husband is in the room.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tristan. The things that split off a lot of these soft Republican voters from Trump, this weekend doesn't change those.
I don't think so.
Underpinning things.
No.
Dobbs is not going to go away because an asshole took a shot at Donald Trump.
Right.
Project 2025 is not going to go away because
that's right.
Because Donald Trump was injured in an attempted assassination. That doesn't make the assassination attempt good, people. We're not defending it. We're not praising it. It's idiotic and horrifying. But Trump's behavior, I think, is the other factor here people are undercounting. His campaign now believes he will act in a dignified, adult, serious way for the rest of the campaign.
No.
Y'all, that's a bad bet with Donald Trump. It's never been a good bet with Donald Trump. And so we're going to end up, I think, having a very, he'll have his convention will end up with Trump trying to behave well, trying to, get the campaign bump, the convention bump. And we're going to then settle in right back to where the election has been for roughly a year. It's a tie ball game in a bunch of tight states, and it's difficult for anybody to predict how it's going to break, how it's going to go. And it's difficult for anybody to see that Trump is going to change who he is. He can't.
No, he's not.
Genetically, generically, temperamentally incapable of being anything other than Donald Trump. So, I think it's going to be a lot to watch in the next couple of weeks. What else are you keeping an eye on as the campaign develops?
Well, I want to turn to the broken young men thing there, because that's one of the other things that I come to here is that this is a horrible situation that was made much more horrible by far right efforts, extremist efforts to basically liberalize and make soft on crime every gun law that we have in America. This kid had an AR style rifle, assault rifle, up on this roof, and there was at least one law enforcement official who reportedly went up there to go see what was going on and engage with this guy, saw that he had a handgun and the other guy had an AR, and backed down. And that was right before the guy took the shot at the stage. So we're talking about a situation in which we've allowed civilians, many of whom clearly have some mental issues, running around with these weapons of war that should really be reserved for military and law enforcement. And they are outgunning the law enforcement officials who have to come in to try to save the day. This happened in Uvalde too. Nobody wanted to go into that school because they were literally being outgunned by the guy inside mowing down children and teachers. So that's the situation that we got.
In Uvalde, though, they had guys with ARs and they
still wouldn't go in.
And they wouldn't go in.
And they still wouldn't go in.
I own guns, and the thing that drives me the most crazy here is this kid was clearly not. He had been relentlessly bullied. He had a no friend group. He had all the pathologies, and he was able to take the gun because it wasn't secured by his parents.
Right.
And every gun I own in my home is not only in a gun safe, it's in a locked room that you have to have a combination with my thumbprint to get in the room to get to the gun safe.
Yep.
And this idea that this guy was out there openly carrying the weapon up to the top of that roof and the Secret Service didn't stop him or spot him. The only thing we should be thankful for is this kid was raised on video games and the wind was blowing and he didn't understand that what he thought was a shot to kill the president got blown off course by an inch. We should be very grateful that he didn't understand that or he wasn't someone who was more
There's
determined.
no wind in a video game, or maybe there is. I just don't know what game that
in
is.
The video game. And so,
Yeah.
So this kid, this sickness that's out there, and Scott Galloway talks a lot about these broken young men, and we've seen it over and over again. And political violence is universally condemned, and rightly so.
Right.
I think, though, the thing we have to understand is that if this kid hadn't shot Donald Trump, he might have gone into a school. He might have shot Taylor Swift or some the sicknesses that have been built up in that demographic of young men. We have got to go after as a country.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ever hear again the excuses like, oh, school shooter X, that's a local problem with whatever. This is a global problem with these young men. There is something broken in our culture that tells them that the way you fix your loneliness and your sadness and your depression is to go out and kill people. There is something broken in our culture about that. Left and right have to look at it differently than we're looking at it now because nobody's solving the problem.
Yep. I think that's right.
I think it is. I think it is a lesson we will miss because on the right, MAGA will say, oh, you invoked this. And this kid was a left-wing, well, whatever. He wasn't, folks. He was a conservative Republican by all the accounts. And a lot of folks on the left will go, oh, it's just about the gun itself. And it's not just about the gun. It's not just about the gun. Family, the gun, the kid, the culture, the online shit that kids marinate in growing up now. We've got to have a holistic approach to this thing because it's not just about this kid taking a shot at the president. It's about dead school kids. It's about kids in the inner city who are fighting to the death over bullshit drug deals. It's about people walking into the Tree of Life synagogue. It's about people walking into churches it's about
extremism online. There is not being nearly done enough to stop the growth of extremism online. Like, I think that we're going to find out more that this kid was broken. He was bullied. He was isolated, and kids like that today, unlike a generation ago, those kids are going to live online and they're going to find other stuff online. And he probably was coming across things that were encouraging of him to think these thoughts and to take these kind of actions. I guarantee it. So we have to have a conversation about that too and really mean it.
Absolutely. I had a former Facebook executive tell me one time, he said, I promise you, we could model looking at anybody's Facebook and Insta feeds, and we could model these kids. We could tell you who they're going to be.
We could tell you who they're going to be.
And he said, interesting thing he said to me, he goes, I can tell you who they're going to be if I know who their parents are. He goes, there are certain things that are indicators. You could absolutely model this thing. And I'm not saying we need to model everybody for extremist behavior, but these platforms need to model on themselves a little bit and determine what's causing this. This kid doesn't look like he was intensely political. He doesn't have a big political online footprint. He was a registered Republican who once gave $15 to a Democratic group on Act Blue. Neither of those to me
that's not even, it looks like that's not even true. That was a different guy with the same name.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Act Blue thing was a different...
No, I didn't see
it. Yeah, he was a different guy who lives in with the same name who lives in Pittsburgh, who gave the $15 to Act Blue. This guy's never given.
Okay.
This kid, the shooter, had never given any donation in his life. He was a registered Republican, and his friends in high school said he definitely was conservative.
Right, but I don't think any of that's truly indicative. He was. It's the loneliness and the bullying.
He's a kid online who's sad and alone and did a horrible thing. And look, at the end of the day, we have to be, if these platforms have the power to do something about extremism on their platforms, and they're not doing it because the law has immunized them.
Right.
Let's just be really clear about the two things that really go together here, Rick.
Section 230.
There are two industries here. There are two industries here that are both legally immune from consequences, and that we have an industrial complex here that's causing all of these slaughters, okay, on all this gun violence. It's Section 230 immunizing all of these big web platforms, even the most giant ones. And second, we also have the gun industry, gun makers and gun sellers are legally immune. You have to really, really work overtime to get around that immunity. They didn't Sandy Hook by focusing on the deceptive advertising, but this was a Bush era piece of legislation that was passed back in like 2004, 2005 to provide legal immunity to gun makers and sellers for what happens with their wares. So we've basically taken these two industries and made them free from accountability, free from consequences. How can we expect them to act any differently if we've given them both a get out of liability free card?
It is a Gordian knot problem in this country, and it is going to be something that we need to wrangle with both those questions very soon. Hey, Tristan, tell us folks where they can find you online.
Well, I've got a podcast now of my own called Taking Down Trump. You're about to detect a theme here. I have a Substack called Taking Down Trump, and I also have my book, Taking Down Trump. Best place to see me is either on my Substack, which is tristansnell.com. You can find more about the book at takingdowntrump.com. And you can always find me at Twitter, which I refuse to call by any other name.
Correct.
I am at Tristan Snell on Twitter and most other socials.
Well, Tristan Snell, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Lincoln Project podcast today, brother. I love talking to you, and I look forward to having you on the show again very soon.
Likewise, Rick. Thanks so much.
Good night and good luck.